Alright guys, got another car repair video for y'all today. Today we're going to be doing the brake pads and rotors on the front on a 2008 Ford Edge, but it'll apply to different years for the Edge and Lincoln MKX. As you can see, these rotors are in pretty rough shape. There's pretty good grooves all around, and the pads are very, very worn. So we're going to be changing out the pads and rotors on this. And first step, I've already gone and unbolted the wheel, but should have 3/4 inch lug nuts. Then after that, we're gonna go ahead and take these slide pins out. So each of your slide pins are going to be 17 millimeters, and they're gonna probably be on there pretty good, especially if your car's in the Northeast. But go ahead and take off the bottom one first, and then kind of loosen the top. That way you can kind of wiggle the brake caliper around. Then after you get that all loosened up and the caliper is actually off, go ahead and get a bungee cord ready, and then just kind of note the direction of your brake hose. You don't want to twist it. If you do end up twisting it, you'll kind of get like a shaking at the high speeds, because basically this will be all bound up. But then once you do that, you can go ahead and hang it from. This is a good spot to hang your bungee cord from with your caliper. All right, so the lower slide pin is out, and do take note. I believe the top one is going to be a little bit longer, but we'll show you kind of like what it looks like. I went ahead and labeled a paper towel with the correct sides. All right, and like so, it is hanging, and then basically, like I said, you can just swivel it back over. That way you know that you're not going to bind up your hose. Then after that, you should be able to take these old brake pads out. These are getting pretty thin, and then the inner ones are looking pretty rough. I mean, there's literally nothing left on that pad. It was the same for the other side as well, but now that that's out, we can go ahead and get to these cradle bolts. And then here they are. So the lower one is going to be a little bit shorter than the upper. So if I line them up side by side, that way you know. This one's also a little brass colored or gold, so that can also help you know which one is which. So then this guy, I believe, is going to be 19 millimeters. Alright, and then keeping organized, I got the two 19 millimeter cradle bolts put right here. They're actually still in pretty good shape, so we're good to reuse all these. We'll just clean them up a bit with wire brush, and then we'll show you the next step. So once you get your cradle bolts loose, you can take that off, and then the rotor actually came off pretty easily, but the surface is very, very rough. So what we're going to do is, with some safety glasses, we're going to come in with here. We're going to have, I got this little brass brush. We'll kind of brush everything down, get rid of all this gunk and rust. And then we'll come in with some sandpaper, just to kind of clean up around the hub a little bit better. And it's not a bad idea to wear some safety glasses while you do this. And if you have a drill with kind of like, I'm not sure what to call it, like a sander attachment, or a brush attachment rather, you can go in here and clean this all up really well, and that'll be even better. But then before you get too far, make sure you take your pad, or your rotors rather, and then just kind of make sure that the diameters are the same. I've already gone ahead and done that on the other side, and we know that they fit and that they'll work. Alright, so we got her all cleaned up. This is about as good as I could get it. But yeah, we got that all cleaned up, and then we can go clean off the cradle as well. So our anti-rattle hardware is still in here, and then you just want to note the direction. So there's a little tab right here. Basically, you want to make sure that that little tab is on the outside, and then on the inside, you want this, where is it? This larger flat edge right here. You want this to be in the middle, so closest to the rotor. But basically, all these do is they just kind of pop out of place. They're going to be in there pretty good, especially if you live in the Northeast. It's going to be pretty corroded like it was on this car, so they just kind of pop out like so. Alright, so I went ahead and brushed where the anti-rattle hardware will go, and I took some brake clean to like kind of clean up the residual dust. But then, like I was saying, to install these new clips, you basically just want to make sure that this flat edge faces the inside. So where we'll start right here. just to show you kind of how it goes. Alright, so I got all the clips installed, and again, this little tab goes on the outside and the big one goes on the inside. Alright, so now next step for your brake rotors. I've opted to use some coated ones since we are in the Northeast. If you have, say you live down south somewhere, you don't need that because they don't use salt. And they're shiny and steel ones. Make sure you take some brake clean and then just kind of wipe off that oily film. They put that on there so it doesn't rust, but if you're using geomet coated rotors, you don't need to wipe them off unless, say, you accidentally get some brake grease on it or something. So then if you do happen to be in the Northeast, I always put a little bit of brake lube just kind of around the wheel hub. If you get any on the studs, just make sure you clean off the excess before you put your rotor on. This just helps to make sure that it doesn't stick the next time we do have to work on this. Alright, and then I just put a little lug nut on there just as a little safety measure. But when you do put it on, just be careful that, you kind of, if you're going to grab it from anywhere, just keep your hands to the outsides, or you can use the inside edge as like a little handle. Alright, so now we have our new brake pads. Here's what they look like. These are all Bosch parts, which I will list down below, but these are going to be ceramic pads. They tend to work better and are more quiet and last longer. But it's always a good idea just to check to make sure everything fits. I've already gone ahead and done that, and we know these are the correct size. And there doesn't appear to be an inner and outer. So they just kind of go on either side. Just make sure you're putting them in the right direction. Alright, now if you've gone ahead and cleaned out kind of like where the slide pins will go, I did happen to knock this dust boot off, but if you did take that off, you can just kind of insert it and it'll pop right in. I'm going to do this actually off camera so I can use both hands. Alright, so now I've went ahead and got the cradle all started, so just kind of starting your 19mm bolts, just lining everything up, and then you can crank them down, and then once we get them all tightened, I'll give you a torque spec. Alright, so I got the pistons all compressed. I'm eventually going to get a tool just because it's way easier, but I use just a brake pad since it's a pretty flat edge, and you can just kind of butt it up there and then push it in with a C-clamp. Some people crack the bleeder screws or pop the cap on the master on the reservoir for the brake fluid, but I've never done that. I've never had a problem. But what I will do is I will take some brake clean and kind of clean off the pistons, and then after that we'll show you what to do next. So at this point what we're going to do is we're going to take the back side of the brake pad. You'll know it's the back because it'll say the brand, and then this little side with the groove is where the pad material is. And we're going to take just a little bit of brake lube and apply it all to these metal sides, and then just a really small drop up top and on the bottom, and then we'll put the new pads in. Alright, so basically the back side of the pad is now all kind of just greased up. That way when we go to slide on our caliper, everything will just go in smooth, and then we won't have to worry about any unwanted noise. That's what the brake grease just kind of helps. And then what I found is you'll probably have to push down on the anti-rattle clip with the pad. That way when if not, it's not going to want to press in as easy, but you got to put that down first, and then it should go right in. And then if you compress this all the way enough, it's not going to be like a very loose fit, but it should slide right over the pads, and then we can put our slide pins back in. So before we do the slide pins, just go ahead and clean that off all the old grease, and then just put a little bit more of the brake lube on it. You don't need a lot. I'll kind of show you what it looks like, but you really don't need a ton on these. So you're looking just for something kind of like that. You really don't need a lot. Just kind of clean off the old stuff and make sure the new stuff is applied evenly. Alright, so caliper's back on. When you go to put it on, make sure that the dust boot is not like pinched off or whatever. If not, you won't be able to get your slide pin in. And then I start the top one first and then the bottom one second. And then we'll get the torque spec so we can get these tightened, and then the cradle bolts. So according to the old Google, these cradle bolts or caliper bracket bolts get torqued to 98 pound-feet, and these slide pins get torqued to, looks like 65 pound-feet. Alright, so after that, go ahead and put all your lug nuts in, 3/4, and then after that, we're going to put the car back on the ground, and then each lug nut gets torqued to 100 pound-feet, and that's just a good way to check to make sure that you got all the lugs tightened. Alright, so this next step, we're in the car now. This is very important. So what you're going to want to do is, you're going to want to go in the car, and then press down on the brake pedal to the floor. It's probably going to be loose. And then by the second one, it should be all good. So then, since we have new pads and rotors, there is a break-in or pad bedding procedure that you're going to want to follow. There's different ways to do it, but typically it involves getting the car nice and warmed up, and then from like 30 miles an hour, moderately press on the brakes and slow down to like 10 miles an hour. So do that 4 or 5 times, and then doing that again at a little bit higher speeds, and then fully letting the brake system cool off. That way the new rotor material, or the new pad material, transfers to the rotors, and then they get broken in nicely, and you don't have to worry about them warping or anything like that. So yeah, just really make sure with the car on that when you push the pedal down, that that's not just going out to the floor and bottoming out. But yeah, and then just make sure that's working before you go driving. And for that, I'll probably just post a link to a website or something that explains that more detail in case you want to refer to it. Not sponsored in any way, of course, but it'll just help you guys out. And that's how you do the pads and rotors on a Ford Edge or Lincoln MKX from 2008. And if this helped you out, give it a thumbs up. And if you like my other videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Have a good one, guys.